In today's video, we're going to be exploring some more off-season trade talk. Today, we're looking at the future of Jacob Chychrun in Ottawa. What does his future hold? Will he stay and be re-signed, or will they move on and change their decor some more? Plus, are there other vets that are still in Calgary getting frustrated, and could they want out this summer? We're looking at some players like Nazem Kadri and Jacob Markstrom, plus the Linus Ullmark trade from Boston to LA that was rejected. Could it have involved Pierre-Luc Dubois? We'll discuss that potential outcome. Plus, we have a whole bunch of other news as well, including the NHL finally confirming the Global Series. More news from the NHL waiver wire. We have another suspension from a young Ranger rookie and fighting phenomenon Matt Rempe, and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots of news to talk about here today, as well as some trade talk that we're likely going to see or potentially see in the offseason. Before we do, have a few other quick items. One, the NHL waiver news today. John Gruden of the Penguins was on waivers yesterday. That player has cleared, so he's been reassigned to the minor league affiliate, and back to the American Hockey League he will go. Longtime NHL veteran Jordan Eberle is set to play in game number 1,000 tonight. So Eberle hits a huge milestone. I remember when Eberle was coming into the NHL, to be honest. That kind of makes me feel a little bit old watching players that I seen from the beginning of their career hit such big milestones and getting closer to the end of their careers. But Eberle's had a solid run in the NHL, 1,000 games. So certainly want to acknowledge that milestone and congratulate him on that huge accomplishment. We also saw the NHL finally confirm today the Global Series. We had already talked about this on the channel a few weeks back with intel from NHL insiders that teams like the Buffalo Sabres, Dallas Stars were going to be heading over to Europe. Buffalo's going to be playing in Munich, Germany in September. Then again in October, Dallas will be heading to Finland as well. So lots of teams going over to Europe again. So that's finally been confirmed. So that's kind of old news here. We've already talked about that. But the NHL's finally put an announcement out. Rangers, tough guy, rookie, whatever you want to call him, fighting phenomenon, 6'8" monster Matt Rempe is facing a suspension by NHL player safety for 4 games. Now, yesterday in the video, I referenced the fact that he was having a hearing and was likely going to be suspended, and I said it was going to be his second suspension. So I actually wanted to correct myself. I actually made a mistake. I thought he was going to be suspended back, a week or two ago when they were playing the Leafs and he nailed Ilya Lyubushkin. I thought he was going to be suspended for that. Turns out he wasn't after all. But I know when that first happened, I thought for sure he was facing his first one, and I just slipped that they didn't actually do anything about it. But this one they did. Of course, he ended up, I guess you could call it like a chicken wing elbow to the head of Devils defenseman Jonas Siegenthaler. The way player safety describes it perfectly. He comes across the ice. Siegenthaler is coming up to try to get the center, to dump the puck in. Rempe's coming across to defend. Has intentions of laying a hit and finishing his check, which is fine. But obviously Siegenthaler slamming on the brakes after he hits center. Rempe at this point almost is going to miss the check because of Siegenthaler slamming on the brakes. Ends up putting his arm up so that he makes some kind of contact and nails him right in the face. Ends up getting 4 games. I know some people might think that's a bit severe, but based on the history and trends we've seen with player safety lately, I think that's kind of what I was expecting. I was thinking 3 to 4. But at the same time, though, I was also thinking, like I said yesterday, I kind of get mixed up thinking he should have been suspended for the Lyubushkin hit, and he wasn't. So I was thinking it was his, already very quickly bordering on repeat offender status, but he's not. 4 games is a lot, but it's obviously a play that they want to get out of the league. He's come into the league with a lot of fanfare. Obviously had some good fights with well-respected, tough guy veterans. We've seen him go with Martin and Delorier and Olivier and a few others. And for the most part, he was earning himself a good reputation. But then he's had some real bad decisions, you could say. So, like I said, the kid's got a future. He's a menace. He's a monster. He's got to learn to play with his size so he doesn't injure others like this and clean things up. But a 4-game ban is intact for the Rangers monster rookie. We also seen some other interesting news today. Something you don't see very often, almost never, but it has happened before. But the Calgary Flames today announced that they've renounced the rights to draft a prospect, Topi Rani. He is a Finnish prospect who they've drafted, who has gotten himself into some legal trouble and has been given a 1-year sentence for rape in Helsinki court. So because of that charge and because of the legal issues he's run into, they've decided to renounce their rights. So he essentially is no longer a Calgary Flames prospect. He will now be, from the NHL standpoint, I guess, an unrestricted free agent. I would think, like the cases of other players that have had a troubled past, like we saw with, Logan Mailloux, like we saw with Mitchell Miller and how that was handled, I would think that before he'd ever be allowed to sign an NHL contract or even play, that he would have to go through meetings with Gary Bettman and have the league kind of give their okay. But at this point, it's difficult to see that happening. I know we'll see. Obviously, it's a pretty serious charge. I'm surprised it's only a 1-year thing for him when it comes to the court decision. But at the end of the day, the Calgary Flames lose a prospect, but somebody they would rather not be associated with. So, it's good on Calgary to cut ties. And unfortunate that we're seeing these kind of behaviors of some of these young players. Now, the Vancouver Canucks, they also made an announcement today. They've announced that they've extended and promoted Ryan Johnson who's the assistant general manager, so he gets a promotion and a contract extension. And they've also extended their other assistant general managers, Emily Castonguay and Cami Granado. So obviously the Canucks having a great season, lots of success there. Things are going well. They're giving extensions basically to all the people in charge of the hockey operations department. Now, as I mentioned, NHL expansion, another big topic here today. Expansion has been a hot topic. We saw not long ago the Ryan Smith-led group, who would like to bring an NHL team to Utah and Salt Lake City, put out a big press release indicating that they're urging the NHL to open formal expansion process. Well, we now have a second group formally making that publicly known and getting it out there. Like I said, these statements, these press releases, they do not get made without the prior knowledge of the NHL and guys like Bill Daly, Gary Bettman. So the Atlanta group that we've been hearing about, so it's called Alpharetta Sports and Entertainment Group, which is being led by former NHLer and TNT broadcaster Anson Carter. So they're expressing their desire now publicly for the NHL to open up the expansion process. We've heard a lot about the group that's trying to bring hockey back to Atlanta, which will be their third attempt. We've heard lots of the players who actually played for the most recent version of that, the Thrashers, indicate that it was actually a really good market. The bigger issue here was ownership and location of arena. Like, there's other factors at play here that allowed her to not be successful. Now, at the time, when they ended up moving back to Winnipeg, when they were looking for new owners, they couldn't find any interested owners in a period of time to keep the team in Atlanta. So therefore, it ended up moving and relocating. But essentially, this sounds pretty serious. Like, I really think there's going to be a strong possibility and desire for the NHL to get to at least 34, if not 36 teams in the next 5, 6, 7 years. Obviously, teams in places like Salt Lake City and Atlanta being pretty vocal publicly now about wanting the team. They have the groups in place. There's arenas, pretty well. Either, like Salt Lake would also have a new arena coming for the Olympic Games. You've got the Atlanta group that's already working on an arena. Like, there's already a lot of big steps in progress here that would be necessary. You still have other teams or places like Houston, which we know are interested. For sure as well. They haven't gone as publicly like these guys. Would be a great market and has expressed desire. I know probably have some involvement of Tillman Fertitta, but I don't think that he wants to be the majority owner. I think he would be involved and he's interested, but I think he'd like somebody else to lead the charge or maybe be more of a minority owner. At least that's my interpretation of that. Quebec City still very much wants a team. They have the arena. It's been sitting there for a while, using it, selling out for Quebec Major Junior Hockey League games at this point. And there's other markets too, but if they're going to get to 36 teams, let's say we want 2 teams in the East, 2 teams in the West. Well, I mean, Salt Lake City in Houston could easily be your Western teams, and Atlanta and Quebec City could be your Eastern teams, for example. So I can see it happening and getting there. I mean, it's going to be mega money for the league. There's no way they can not push this forward, in my opinion. The Coyotes' future obviously is going to be playing a big role too, because like we said before, if the Coyotes have to move, the NHL is going to try to go back there and make it work, and they're going to end up getting another expansion team down the road. But if the Coyotes can get it to go here and they can get this arena figured out, and they do end up staying, then they'll stay in Arizona, and then all the other teams will be expansion teams instead of one of those places getting a relocation team. So either way, lots of news in the expansion world, and I do think there's a good chance we're going to see it happen. I would not be surprised sometime this year if they formally open the process. I mean, it's a long process. It can be like a year process or more before they even make decisions on teams, and then they start, once they grant the franchise, then you're looking at probably at least 1 or probably 2 years out before they play their first game. So even if they formalize the process this year, it'd be at least 3 to 4 years before these teams would be, beginning their existence and starting to play. So either way, I think it's going to happen, and just interesting to see another group go public here with it. On the trade front of the video, I know there's still lots of talk around Sens defenseman Jacob Chychrun and what his future is. I know anytime the media talks about the Senators right now, that's probably one of the main hot topics around the team. And to be honest, yesterday we talked about the possibility of Erik Karlsson returning to Ottawa. Well, and I think obviously, shaking up the decor, I do think is necessary. I do think they need another right shot guy. Whether or not it's Karlsson or somebody else coming back there, they're going to have to move, I think, one of the lefties. And it's not going to be Jake Sanderson. I know, listen to Ian Mendez today talking to Jeff Merrick Show, and he essentially said that he thinks there's a pretty good chance that Steve Staios and the ownership group there are going to probably make a decision in either Chabot or Chychrun. One of the two likely gets dealt, not a given, but it's likely, and they try to bring in another. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be the same deal. They could be traded for something different, but essentially to bring in another top pair right shot defenseman to swap a lefty out for a righty. We know they want to address goaltending, and obviously they're going to have to address the depth around some of the other areas of the franchise as well. But in all honesty, I think Chychrun has a strong desire to stay in Ottawa. I think his play in the final 20 games here down the stretch is going to be a big factor. And I also think that whether or not they consider moving Chabot will play a role in whether or not he stays. I think he stays if Chabot's moved. If not, it's going to be him. I think it's a pretty good chance that one of the two goes. So ultimately, you don't hear as much talk about Chabot except for some media members acknowledging the fact that he could end up being the guy that's traded. But when you hear, there's lots of this, everybody's bringing up the future of Chychrun, and I honestly think it's more tied to the future of Chabot than it is anything else. I think Chychrun would be happy to stay. I think he'd be happy to sign long term, and I think he'd be happy to sign for a number that the Sens would be very happy with. I really do. I think they can get him cheaper than Chabot. And if they move Chabot's contract, as much as he's a very likable guy and been there a long time, Sens fans love Thomas Chabot. But if you move him, you do get more cap flexibility, and you can get Chychrun to do the similar type role for less money. And he's not much younger, but a tad younger. So, in all honesty, it might be the better way to go. So lots to talk about Chychrun still, but I think people should be talking more about Chabot and how they're linked together. And the future of one of them is going to impact the other this offseason. Now in Calgary, again, they've sold off tons of veterans. We saw it start earlier in the year with Dufour. Then we've seen it go to Elias Lindholm. We've seen Chris Tanev. We've seen Noah Hannafin. We've seen a mass exodus there. Lots to talk about Jacob Markstrom still. Markstrom very likely to get traded this offseason. It was really close before, and now we know there's a fractured relationship there. So it's not a given. Odds are high Markstrom goes. And then if another veteran goes out the door, what does that mean for the other vets that have stayed? and have previously given a long-term commitment. Like there's some talk I've seen on some NHL insiders wondering about the future of Nazem Kadri. Kadri signed a 7-year deal there. In the second year now, he'd have 5 years left, but we've seen him find ways to move other players. Look at Thomas Hertl in San Jose. It can be done. Would a guy like Kadri end up wanting out of there? I mean, the guy's ultra competitive guy. I'm sure he didn't sign there with the intention of going through a major rebuild. What's Jonathan Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar thinking? So could we see more veterans? But I know Kadri's the main name that's being brought up by insiders about the future, wondering if he'll want out. But I do think that it's going to be tougher and tougher for Craig Conroy to sell his vision with more and more veterans going out the door in Calgary. Now, we talked about back, I want to say it was right after the trade deadline. So I want to say it was this past weekend. I had a video out talking about a rejected trade that was reported between Linus Ullmark, and it was believed to be the LA Kings. There's some people that think it was the Colorado Avalanche. I wouldn't be completely surprised if it was both. I think the Bruins were having pretty serious trade conversations around this player with the hopes of upgrading other areas, most likely the center position. Now, there's more information that have come out suggesting that the offer for the Kings sounds and most people think are the closest to happening, because we know Ullmark ultimately rejected the deal because he does have the ability to block about half the league with his modified no trade. And essentially the belief is that it was Pierre-Luc Dubois on the table. The Bruins had an opportunity to get a legit top 6 center, but it got concerning. The LA Kings just traded for him last offseason. This is his first campaign, not even a full season, signed an 8-year deal after working his way out of Winnipeg, and they're already frustrated and willing to move him. This guy has bounced around now a lot. Like, look at how he was a budding superstar in Columbus, that coming out party he had in the bubble against the Maple Leafs. Then he leaves Columbus. He gets traded to Winnipeg for Laine. Has his moments there, but probably fair to say he didn't really live up to full expectations. Finagled his way out of there. A lot of people thought he wanted to go to Montreal, which he did openly say that he would love to do someday. Never happened. Gets traded and signs an 8-year deal in the Los Angeles Kings organization. Now we're already not even a full season in, and his name is being brought up in trade rumors. I mean, he's supposed to be the guy that's there long term to eventually be the top center when a guy like Kopitar and Danault, obviously, are getting older. He's supposed to be that insulator right now who can play a top 6 role and be there to step into the shoes of Kopitar when he's done. And not even a season in, and they're already at that frustration level. So there is obviously some belief that Ullmark has no desire at all to go west, largely due to his family situation. So if he is moved by the Bruins, it sounds like he will want to stay east, and he can do that with his trade protection in his contract. But the most interesting thing to me, because we've already talked about the fact that Ullmark was being shot by the Bruins. There were some close calls. He had to block at least one trade. But to find out that it was Pierre-Luc Dubois that was the most likely player coming back, it's quite telling and surprising from the Kings side of things when you think about it. That is absolutely crazy. I mean, the Bruins, I can understand with their lack of center depth long term. I mean, after losing Bergeron and Krejci, like I said, the guys they've had step up, like Charlie Coyle, Zaka, they've done a real fine job. But I don't know that the Bruins management really believes that long term that's going to be sustainable for them to be a top 1 or 2 teams in the Atlantic Division. They need some more depth and youth coming into that position for sure. And Dubois would have been a great option if he would play up to his potential. But it goes to show you just how, when it's on 3rd team already, and he's already frustrating, and Kings are willing to move him. Be interesting to see if anything happens with him this summer too. So we'll see on that. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.